For decades, researchers assumed morning stiffness was simply the price of getting older, joints settling overnight, cartilage thinning, the body slowing down. But a cluster of studies published in the last 10 years tells a different story entirely. That 30-minute struggle to move freely after you wake up is not random wear and tear. It is your body's inflammation system running on a timer. Here is what that means in practice. Inflammation is not just the redness around a cut. It is a whole body process governed by your immune system that follows a daily rhythm called a circadian cycle. During the night, certain inflammatory proteins, researchers call them cytokines, naturally rise. By early morning, they are near their peak. For most people under 40, that peak is mild and clears quickly. But after 60, the baseline of that inflammation tends to be higher to begin with, and the morning spike sits noticeably above it. Scientists have a name for this persistent low-level state: inflammaging. It is not a disease diagnosis, it is a pattern, a gradual decades-long shift in how the immune system calibrates itself. The immune system becomes slightly more trigger-happy, releasing small amounts of inflammatory signaling, even when there is nothing obvious to fight. And while the amounts are small, they accumulate. Over years, they affect joints, arteries, brain tissue, and muscle. Morning stiffness is one of the earliest places the body makes that process visible and felt. What makes this genuinely useful to know is that inflammaging is not a fixed biological fate. The research is clear that lifestyle factors, particularly sleep quality, movement patterns, and what you eat across the day, can shift that inflammatory baseline in measurable ways. Not overnight and not by enormous amounts, but enough that a significant portion of people who change those habits report shorter, milder morning stiffness within a matter of weeks. That is the part worth sitting with. A symptom most people accept as simply being 65 is for many a modifiable signal. So, what does the evidence actually point toward? Start with sleep, because the overnight inflammatory surge is tied directly to sleep architecture, the sequence of light and deep sleep cycles your body moves through. When that architecture is disrupted, the inflammatory proteins released during the night stay elevated longer. Research published in journals tracking older adults found that people with fragmented sleep, waking frequently, spending little time in deeper stages, consistently showed higher morning stiffness scores than people whose sleep was more continuous. The connection is not casual, it is biochemical. Improving sleep quality at this stage of life often comes down to a handful of consistent habits rather than any single intervention. Keeping a fixed wake time 7 days a week, even weekends, is the one change sleep researchers return to most often. It anchors the body's internal clock, which in turn helps regulate the timing and intensity of that overnight inflammatory cycle. Dimming lights in the hour before bed, keeping the room cool, and avoiding screens that emit short wavelength light all support the same mechanism. Small adjustments working on the same underlying biology. Now consider movement, not exercise in the aspirational sense, but actual physical activity in the hours after waking. When you move large muscle groups, they produce and release their own anti-inflammatory molecules called myokines. This is a relatively recent discovery, and it has reframed how researchers think about why active older adults age differently from sedentary ones. The muscles are not just mechanical, they are an endocrine organ, sending signals through the bloodstream that actively suppress the same inflammatory proteins driving morning stiffness. The implication is almost ironic. The time of day when moving feels hardest is exactly when it does the most good. This does not require a gym or a structured workout. The research supporting myokine release includes light walking, gentle stretching, and resistance movements using body weight. 15 to 20 minutes of deliberate movement within an hour of waking appears across several studies to be a meaningful threshold, not because the exercise itself is vigorous, but because it interrupts the inflammatory momentum of the night before it has a chance to settle in for the day. Think of it less as fitness and more as a daily reset for your immune system's morning schedule. Nutrition also plays a role, and the pattern that appears most consistently in the long-term data is not about any single food or supplement. It is about the overall dietary landscape across a week. Diets that are high in refined carbohydrates and ultra-processed foods sustain elevated inflammatory markers measured in blood tests across the entire day and night. Diets built around vegetables, legumes, whole grains, oily fish and olive oil are associated with lower baseline inflammation. The Mediterranean dietary pattern shows up in this research so repeatedly that it has become something of a reference point for researchers studying inflammaging specifically. There is also an emerging thread of research around eating timing. The inflammatory cycle follows a circadian pattern, and some evidence suggests that eating most of your calories earlier in the day with a lighter evening meal aligns better with that cycle than the more common pattern of a small breakfast and a large dinner. This is not settled science, and individual circumstances vary enormously. But if you find yourself eating heavily late at night and waking stiff and uncomfortable, that connection is worth raising with your doctor as part of a broader conversation about inflammation. One other factor carries consistent weight in the literature, and it is one that surprises people: chronic stress. The stress hormone cortisol in the short term actually suppresses inflammation. But with prolonged or poorly managed stress, that suppression breaks down and the inflammatory response becomes dysregulated. Older adults managing significant ongoing stress, caregiving, grief, financial worry, social isolation show measurably higher inflammatory markers. This is not a matter of attitude or resilience of character, it is physiology. Social connection, time outdoors, and practices that create reliable moments of calm all show up as protective factors in the data. Putting this together into one clear picture, morning stiffness after 60 is a signal worth listening to, not dismissing. It is the body making visible an underlying inflammatory state that over the long term touches nearly every system that matters for independence and quality of life: joints, heart, cognition, muscle. But it is also one of the more responsive signals the body sends. Sleep consistency, morning movement, a diet built around whole foods, and steady stress reduction are not miracle interventions. They are the inputs that the published evidence links most directly to reducing that underlying baseline. They are within reach for most people. The one conversation this video cannot have for you is the one with your own doctor. If your morning stiffness is significant, lasting more than an hour, affecting specific joints more than others, or accompanied by other symptoms, that is a clinical conversation, not a lifestyle one. Conditions that involve inflammation as a core mechanism are real, common in this age group, and treatable. What changes when you understand the biology is that you walk into that appointment with better questions and you leave it with a clearer sense of what levers you actually have. That, more than anything, is what this is about. Not managing decline, understanding it, and meeting it with something other than resignation.